Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Wave podcast. I know it's been a while. It's been about 2 weeks. I was sick this previous week, and then the week before, I was just swamped with work. I've been recording an album at the moment, and Andrew and I just couldn't find time, unfortunately. But we're going to try to make sure that doesn't happen again in the future. I'm feeling a little bit better. I might sniffle here and there, but I'll try to mute my microphone so you don't hear it. Maybe my voice sounds a little scratchy. I don't know. I swear I don't smoke
I think it
cigarettes.
sounds all right. Not so bad.
Not so bad. If you heard me a couple days ago, it was like, "Hey guys, welcome to the Wave podcast."
Oh,
It would
God.
have been brutal. So that's
Got
why
the
we didn't do it
stoma
last week.
effect.
But let me turn.
Well, we're
this a
glad
little
you're
bit.
feeling better. I'm definitely glad. It's been nice to talk with you again.
Yeah, it's nice to reconnect. I know you've been busy as well, figuring out, this other part-time thing you've got going on. But
Yes. Personal obligations, family stuff happening too.
yeah. You're being a good son, taking care of your mom.
She helped me for about 20 years, man. So it feels like the least I could do.
That is you're such a sweet boy. You're what they
Aw,
call a
thanks,
sweet boy.
Seamus.
So, but here we are. We're back at it. The dynamic duo. Ugh.
Yes.
Anyway, we're back again, and today we're going to talk about things like self-reflection. We're going to talk about just self-reflection in general. And there's a couple of big topics. Let me make sure I have the topics pulled up so I can make this look natural because it's not natural.
Especially after a couple of weeks. I mean, it's only been 2 weeks, but sometimes it kind of feels longer. More like a
It
month.
does, yeah. Getting back into the
it
swing of this
drags.
is going to be a little difficult, but we're going to not take a break like that again, and we're going to have some more guests on soon. It has just been a hell of a last 2 weeks for me. And
Yeah, it's
for
been
Andrew,
strange.
So it just got difficult, but we've got lots of cool stuff coming up. We're going to put love back into this
Yes.
channel again because we do like doing this.
Yes, I enjoy it a lot.
So self-reflection, I think being realistic about where you actually are and being humble is a really important distinction to make from your ego, because I think ego is actually, if we could start with that, I think ego is actually pretty important for doing this. I don't think anybody gets anywhere in the musical field without first thinking that they're pretty awesome, right?
Totally.
I think
Totally.
having that healthy ego to tell you, like, no, you're good enough, you can do this, like maybe even overconfidence at first. I guess we'll just
Confidence.
do
Absolutely.
I guess we'll just do story time. Like when I first started out, I was extremely arrogant. I thought I was the best person in the area. And, I look back, I'm like, I know that wasn't true. I don't even think that's true now. But
Yeah.
at the time, that was what drove me to get more clients and to take on jobs that I was honestly pretty nervous to do because I had never done them before. But it was just like, I know what I'm doing. Fuck this. I'm good. I can do whatever. Like, I think
Totally.
that attitude can be kind of important in just getting your foot in the door with this stuff, because it's so
It's good to know how to balance it.
yeah, it's so hyper competitive that if you don't have that drive, if you don't have that ego in thinking that you are worth, you are worth bands giving you money to do work for them.
Yes.
When in all honesty, you're probably not quite there yet. But if you don't have that ego, then I don't even think you'll get your career started.
No. And if you do, I mean, like it's the same as like standing your ground on your rates is an example that like
Mhm.
you just need to have the confidence and know that you like can provide value through what you're doing, like to
Yeah.
the band. They know what they're looking for, and if you can make those ends meet and solve a problem for them, that is production. It's good to know that you can do that in your head and to not sit there and think like, well, who am I to do this? And like, why would I say that number or whatever? Because it just makes it non-sustainable, and it makes it way more stressful and difficult for you to take on projects where you're underpaid.
Yeah.
So to have that confidence to know that you're worth that and to stand that ground, it's nothing but beneficial.
Well, I think the distinction there is you are able to charge that rate because you have a track record and a history of working on stuff. So you have like a portfolio.
This is true.
And when you're just starting out,
Yeah.
you have none of that. You have none of the history. You have not successfully
Good
done
point.
any projects with people. And yet somehow you have to have it in your head that like, I can fucking do this. So
Yes.
yeah, it is like Now it's not overconfidence, it's just confidence, right? Like, but when you're younger, it is like straight up just ego. I'm amazing. I can do this.
Yeah.
And you have no real world experience to back that up, but you just feel
No,
as
it's
if you
well,
can do it. So,
yep.
now,
Which is a blessing and a curse, I feel like, to feel like you want to be the top dog on that project, or to just to go out into the world and think that. I feel like that's like the right amount of crazy to give you that push.
yeah.
But it can be way overdone.
Well, I mean, we're all crazy. Nobody who goes into
Yeah.
music is a normal, sane person. If you were normal and sane, you'd go be like an investment
A
banker or
lawyer.
something. A lawyer, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You go do something with actual, like, I mean, there's money available in music, some for some people, but, consistent income, I guess, is really what I'm getting at. But,
Yes. Yes. Not easy to find.
yeah. But that just as important as that overconfidence is, I think it becomes equally important over time to make sure you get humble. Because I don't know about you, but in my experience, I worked under a couple of different engineers, and each time I did, I slowly started to realize like I really don't know much, and these guys know a
Totally.
hell of a lot more than I do. And if I just shut up and listen and ask questions and learn everything about their process, it's going to make me a lot better.
Yes. Asking questions and like having people that can be of some sort of resource to you if you do have questions, like your and I's relationship.
Yeah.
It's been super beneficial that way because I feel comfortable to ask you questions because I know I don't know everything. And I'm in the same position where I don't feel like I don't have the same ego that I used to, thinking that, like, well, I'm the only guitarist in class that can do this. So, like,
Hmm.
I must be the best.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not the way it is, you know? And I feel like you're never going to get that information unless you're willing to open up and, like, admit you don't know everything, ask questions, and, like, put it to work in some way.
It's easy to feel like the best when you're working in your small hometown. It gets harder
Oh,
when
God,
you're
yeah.
thinking your region, and then you're
Yep.
thinking your country, and then, it just keeps scaling. And you realize that, the music industry is made up of all the best people from their hometowns. Like everybody
Totally.
who is a producer who's good in your area was the best in their hometown. And like, it doesn't really matter. Now they're struggling to be the best in, the entire like city and surrounding counties.
Absolutely. It's
The
tough.
level of competition just scales. Yeah. So,
Can be kind of discouraging at times, too, when you really get stuck in that loop of thinking about it.
yeah.
uh, I've been discouraged by not listening to other people's mixes, but just like seeing other people's like quote unquote success stories, their social media success stories. When behind the scenes they're working just as hard as the next guy,
Hmm.
trying to get better and succeed and just make that push forward all the time through their craft. But
I think we were just
I
talking
used to
about
get
this
like,
with, sorry, go ahead.
oh, it's all you. I just used to get discouraged by that.
Yeah. I think we were talking about this with content creators. Everybody
Yep.
has
Yep.
this idea that being a YouTuber is like a cushy career, and like, sure, they don't have to work with their hands, but if you look at the frequency that these guys are putting out videos, like that is a lot of work. That is a shitload of
Absolutely.
work to do that. And, everything sounds good, everything looks good as well. Like, okay, that means they put in more work doing that. Maybe they have an editor, but at that point, it's because they've worked their fucking ass off for years and years and years to be able to afford that. With a lot of
Yes.
YouTube channels, it takes, years before you see any real traction. So you just have to consistently be putting out content just because you want to, which is difficult.
It's like that in a lot of creative fields too.
Hmm.
Most, I would say, it takes a while. You even if you're not like successfully landing clients and jobs, and if you're mainly relying on social media to distribute your content, whatever it is,
Hmm.
it takes a while to like be that person in someone's eyes that like, hey, he's actively doing this all the time, and they see those examples of your work and maybe even see your growth over a long period of time to where they would trust you with what they have.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a couple of different things. Like you have to brand yourself in some way, and that's not exactly like, you know, having a logo or having like a username, or that can certainly help sometimes. But by branding, I just mean what can you do to get people to associate your craft with you? So when they think of
Yeah,
like, hey, there's Seamus, me for an example, the first thing that I want people's minds to go to is there's Seamus, he produces music. Like that's what I want them to instantly think of. So every, personal post that I make on social media, there's, everybody likes memes. I share memes and stuff, right?
of
But
course.
like
Yeah.
every personal post that I make, it's to further that brand of, this is what I do. I'm here, I'm in the control room, I'm working on something.
It's true. I mean, it's down to like every word that you put in there, your copy, the quality of your content, like
mm,
just the overall format of every post, I feel like, which at that point is kind of breaking down to marketing, but all those steps that you take every post or whatever as a whole are the brand, your personality, who you are, how you appeal,
yeah.
what you do, how you talk. I
I
mean,
think you've actually done a better job than I have with that. I think you're better at the
oh,
online
thanks,
presence
man.
stuff. You're better at just like explaining, you know, in a simple way everything that you're doing, which I really haven't been good at that. I either just show people that I'm working or I, you know, post the music that I've finished. But you're pretty good at keeping
Totally.
people, at letting people see every stage of the process, which is really cool. I think that's one of your strengths.
Thanks, man. I got that from somebody on TikTok. They were
Mm,
talking about transparency, and I started seeing things. I would pick and pull what I see from my day job at the time, and like transparency was their thing. So I figured, like, what better way, what other way, really, to be transparent about what's happening now than to show like tools and explain why I'm using them and show people like along the ride of a production of a band or like my
mm.
own project. I feel like that just resonates with people a little more than maybe only posting like the album or whatever have you, which does get the job done and it does bring awareness because then they get to hear the final product. I feel like I also
Yeah.
lose people by making so many posts about so much little stuff that maybe it's kind of spammy or annoying. You know, I worry
Sure,
about that.
sure,
But
but on the flip side, maybe it might be useful in that people don't really understand what goes into music production, and when they hear, a professional's rates, they're like, "That's too much money." It's like, well, once they
totally.
see all the work that goes into it, maybe then they start to understand, here's why it costs this, because I put in all this effort to get it there. It takes a lot of time. Um,
Yeah.
so there's two ways of looking at it. I think it's been working out for you, though. It seems like you've been getting reached out to by people from hours away, which is,
Yep.
I mean, you
Without it, I
have,
wouldn't be where I'm at.
yeah, I mean, you have the unfortunate situation where you decided to start working in an area where there's just not a whole lot of people, and it's like a pretty rural area with towns that are really far apart from each other, right? So
Yes. Yep.
social media has been a lifeline for you. I feel like that's how you've gotten a lot of new
Yeah.
clients. Where with me, I've
Probably
stuck with just word of mouth.
60%.
That's amazing, honestly, because for
Word of
me, it's
mouth
been
is the
word of
way to
mouth.
go. It's very. I feel like that's a very strong connection to have is word of mouth. That's like free marketing, one, and two, that really like non-egotistically puts you on a pedestal of sorts.
Well,
And I feel like it just drives demand a little more if they're talking about you that way.
word of mouth is nice in that you can have less clients, but they're very loyal, like that, because they're not just clients, right? Like these are friends of
Yeah,
friends generally who end up coming to me, and then they become my friends because they know the same people I do mostly. So
totally.
that's a really cool relationship. And then it's interesting. I keep saying Sometimes it's sometimes it's
Yeah,
who the
her.
fuck knows what else I'm gonna keep saying. These
Yeah,
dumb filler words as I try to get back into the broadcasting voice. Hello.
you got this.
Welcome to the nightly news at 10 or whatever they talk like. Anyway,
Welcome to 94.9
yeah,
KSYNBC.
to the radio. Hey, welcome to
Yeah, welcome to Butt
welcome
Rock
welcome to
Nation.
98 Rock. None of those guys talk like that.
Yeah, dude.
That's a radio voice. Um,
Start a radio station next.
but it was really cool. I've had shows. I said, again, I'm gonna just skip it. I'm not gonna keep pointing it out. I've had shows that I have gone to where either a majority of the bill or the entire bill is bands that I've worked with, and that's really cool. You're kind of
That's awesome.
you're treated like a local celebrity then at that point, even if
Yes.
you don't think these people give a shit. If you go there, automatically all of the bands, and the bands just keep hanging out with you. So you're like in the middle of the action at that show. So that's really
A
really
very
fun.
cool feeling.
Yeah, that's a really really fun feeling. A really really fun night too, and it's great for networking.
Definitely.
So that's the benefit of word of mouth and keeping it in the family. To say
Yeah, of
for better or
course.
for worse.
Like you're saying, loyalty too.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's almost the opposite of online clients that I get because it's very sporadic.
Yeah.
There are people who I've done like one song for it. They love it. They pay for it. They say how much better it was, and then they never come back.
I've had people like that. I've had people that I like who might be a friend of a friend who have only paid me for one project. I've had people who I like who started a project and never finished. And
Yeah.
I think life just happens, you know. It's
This is true.
so easy to take everything personally, but shit happens. Music isn't a priority.
You got to
for a
learn
lot
to
of these
separate
people.
that.
Yeah, music isn't the priority for a lot of these people. It's something they're doing for fun sometimes.
Totally.
I have this one guy
Finding those dedicated bands are definitely a blessing.
I have this one guy who is a rapper who came to me, and I wrote a fucking sick beat for him, and he loved it. And
Very nice.
We did vocals, and the vocals have to get like melodized because we're just doing that kind of style. And it's all cool. And he ran out of money, because the situation he was in at the moment was it's like during the pandemic, his work shut down. So he went from living on his own, he had to move back in with his parents. So
rough.
moved back in with his mom, and he was working a job and spending his money starting to record with me, and I think he just had family pressure, like, hey, you gotta get a car and get back on your feet again. And so he kind of just wasn't able to keep coming until he's got that done. We've chatted a couple of times. He's still a nice guy. I know he loves what we did together, but basically what I'm trying to get at is like life sucks and happens sometimes. And before the pandemic, he was doing great, making a ton of money, you know, living in his own apartment with a girlfriend, and things changed a lot. He didn't have to have a car. He lived in the middle of the city. And now all of a sudden he lives not in the city and he needs to commute places to work. So, yeah.
Shit happens.
Shit
you have like
happens.
real life priorities.
Yeah. Shit definitely happens, man.
And if what you're doing already is not, say, a total career with the income that you would definitely like, it's hard to put that at the front of everything. You just have to handle like the real life scenarios. It is real life doing music, but if it's something that you can put off in order to better something else that's like a total necessity, you just got to do it.
Yeah, the clients I'm working with at the moment, the album that I'm working on, it's really cool in that I think up until this last payment that they made, that's like the first time they've put money into the band in maybe since, you know, the first time they ever did it. Because they've just done a really good job touring and earning money and selling merch. So after they had that initial investment, they didn't have to invest anymore. The band kind of sustained itself, which is really cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I think they paid about half of the cost for the album up front, and like after that, now they're paying out of pocket. But you know, that's pretty cool. They've been a band for a long time. They've done an album with me before, and the band fund paid for all of that. So very
man, that's cool to hear.
Yeah. Excuse me.
That's sustainability. I've worked one project. It was a band called Hella Metal from Dunsmuir, California.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing. They just played shows. They've been together for like 3.5 years now, I think. And they, the guy, the vocalist / guitarist, is like celebrity famous, kind of like you were talking about before. He just knows everybody within like a 3-hour radius.
So local celebrity. He's like.
Yeah,
he's
totally.
Like that guy.
Super quality dude.
That's a great dude to get connected with, man. I mean, I bet you're going to get a handful of clients through him throughout the years that are going to end up being very loyal.
You know, so far I've gotten one, and that's okay because it's been a very short time since their record released. But
which client was
it? To get that done, it was the same way. They're called American Metal Project.
Okay, so they're the band that you're working with now, who is super serious, and
yes,
they are extremely loyal already. Like they haven't complained about price. They're working hard, and they're good musicians. And your mixes you've been doing for them are killer. So
it's like the best of every angle.
Yeah, that worked out really well. So I would say even if that's the only client you get from that other guy, that's a huge plus. You've now got a loyal client who is ready to work. You know, they're all ready to just release a lot of music. So worth.
And they're doing the same thing with like self-sustainability too, where they're paying for everything through profits from the band.
That's really fucking cool.
As much as they can. 95% of it, they sell merch and they play shows and like have online people who buy merch.
That's sick.
And then they just turn it into production, and I admire that a lot because I remember that being extremely difficult to do.
It is difficult to do, but that's the difference between a serious band and, you know, a band that's still either trying to get to that level, or you don't have to be famous to do that. You just got to work hard.
No.
Yeah.
Yep.
Earthworm's just done a bunch of tours. They toured Canada like twice. They toured the U.S. a couple
Oh
times.
wow.
Like they've
Damn.
just put in the work. You know, you go to their
That's
Spotify
dope.
and they don't really have many listeners on Spotify, but it doesn't matter. Like they have people who know who they are, who buy their shit. That's what matters.
Totally.
Yeah.
There are people that I see on TikTok who have like 56 monthly listeners, but they get on sync licensing and they make 6 figures every year.
That's amazing.
Now, those
Yeah.
numbers are sometimes like totally irrelevant.
Yeah,
It
sometimes.
doesn't matter,
Especially in more
unless you're
underground
trying
forms
to.
of music, because a lot of underground
Yes.
fans might not even use Spotify. They might just buy your CD, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that stuff is important. Having merch.
It is.
Also, Earthworm is very smart with their merch. Like they did they did an Earthworm shirt where it was either like they took like the Bang Bros the Bang Bros logo or something like that, and they made it say Earthworm or something, or Von Doom, which is like
Dude, that's dope.
they've been really smart and like funny with their merch ideas, and it's sold well because of that.
Yeah, dude. I feel like humor and like humor, sex, and like happiness are things that sell very well.
Yeah. Well, it's good that they've got the humor, because they're just two regular dudes. I don't think they've got the sex thing going for them. But
Oh no, I feel the same way.
same, yeah. So we're getting sidetracked, but that's a good little tangent I think we took. Where do we go from here? What was the last thing we were talking about before we got off on bands? Anyway, word of mouth was
Self-reflection.
Yeah, self-reflection.
Coming
If
after
I
that,
wanted to
I
compare
hit-
myself to other people in the area, I would probably say I don't have the same notoriety. I don't have the amount of clients that they seem to have, and yet I'm doing just fine. So perspective is really hard to have. It's easy to get this warped perspective that you're not as good as you actually think, you actually know you are, right? So we can
totally.
get into imposter syndrome, which is a huge deal. I constantly feel
Massive.
like I'm never going to be good enough. And, you compare yourself to producers that you love, and you're always trying to attain their mixes, and you listen to it, and it just feels like yours is miles away still. And that's where imposter syndrome kicks in, and you don't hear the progress that you've made over the last years, whatever amount of years, and you just hear how far you've got left to go. So your
Yeah.
perspective gets completely fucked. You feel like you just suck. And the fact of the matter is, if you're getting paid to do this stuff, you're probably pretty good at it. Hopefully.
Yeah, I would say so as well.
Yeah.
It does always seem like you're miles away, but you've also like come very, very large amounts of miles. I've looked back to some of my old music and kind of been like, wow, like I have come a long way, but for some reason it just doesn't feel like I'm where I want to be yet.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a perspective thing too, I feel like, to some degree, because there are times where I do feel like I'm that guy, but then I shut myself down and think you're just being cocky.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's that balance where you have to kind of know that you're good at what you're doing, not only because you're getting paid for it, but like just listening to your mixes, they feel good. They're better than what they were. Maybe they're better than a lot of people in your area, or maybe they're to par, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like keeping yourself in check on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. I think I always feel like I'm it starts with each project starts with me thinking I'm amazing. And then as the project goes on, and you have to make compromises and decisions, like as problems rise up, you get to the end of the project. It might sound really good, but your brain doesn't really let you hear that. It's like all you hear are the little things you had to compromise on and the mistakes, and you hear how different it is from the initial thing in your head. But
Oh, totally.
but I think it's because you're so detail oriented that you can't do that. But that detail oriented thinking is what makes you good at this stuff. So
Yeah.
it's difficult, but I tend to find a couple of months after a project has been released, I can actually go back and listen to it, and then actually listen objectively to what I've done. But when it's still fresh in my head and I'm thinking about exactly the EQ moves I made, or like how a certain thing is hitting a chain of a compressor or something like that, and all the little things I can tweak. Like I have the worst perspective on it. I'm down to
It's
the
hard to listen
I'm
to.
down to the micro level. I'm not listening to the big picture at that point, which is annoying,
Yeah.
but it's just par for the course when you're involved in every little minutia of every project that you work on.
Oh, absolutely. I love coming back to projects after a couple of months and hearing them because it gives my brain time to maybe start the next project, or maybe not inherently my brain, but just to start the next project so I'm not thinking about it, or just clear my fog.
Yeah.
And then I can actually listen to it, like you're saying, subjectively, because I don't have those like small pinpoint things that I'm thinking about. Those are like long gone. So I can hear it for like what it is and the balance. And I feel like if I can reference it at that point, I can actually think like, oh, this sounds okay. Like this
Yeah.
is better than I thought it was.
Yeah, that's always how I think. I'm never like, this is amazing, because I'm still hearing mistakes, right? But I usually it is like, we did a pretty good job. Like this turned out pretty good, you know?
Totally.
I don't think my brain will ever let me go, that's perfect. Because if it was perfect,
No.
I'd probably be winning Grammys, and I'm not.
Yeah.
There's that honest perspective about yourself, right? And even people who are
I feel
winning
like to some
Grammys,
degree,
I bet you they listen to their stuff and they're like, I could have done that better.
I'm
You know?
sure. I'm sure that the perfect mix thing, I feel like, is subjective, sort of.
Yeah,
Obviously,
it
bad
is.
mixes are a real thing, but after a
Plenty of
point,
those, yeah.
balance is balance, and what you're going for in that style of music, if you can already achieve something that like makes you want to continue to begin with, I feel like you're on the right track. It's just a
I think so.
never-ending like mountain of educating yourself.
Yeah, educating yourself and expanding your processes, and realizing that in order to make stuff better, you're constantly going to have to just get more and more in depth with every single aspect of recording and mixing. There's no easy
Totally.
way to make something sound good. You have to put in the work. Whether it be the last mix I did, there was a really dynamic guitar, and I had to go through the entire mix and almost, cut out each individual note and clip gain automate it, because a compressor just wasn't working properly, because some peaks were so loud and some parts were so quiet that, like,
Oh
in order to
man.
set the compressor so it would capture the loud parts, the quiet parts would be completely unaffected, and they would just like, the glue would just like disappear. It was just a nightmare. But going through that as I'm doing it, I'm realizing that I should probably be doing this on more things, and
Totally.
now I'm going to do that. It's gonna suck. It's a lot
It's
of
gonna
work.
sound good though.
Oh, it will. It will sound really, really good. So, no
It's a lot
shortcuts.
of little things
Yeah.
along the way. I feel like, especially when I started using reference tracks in my mix, is when I like started hearing things almost in a different way, and just
Hmm.
more detail oriented way to the mixes. And that's what I would kind of consider like the healthy amount of self reflection, is kind of using that as a goal rather than be like wondering like, why am I not that good, and like what am I not doing.
Yeah.
Kind of like striving for it. You're kind of working towards the goal rather than like beating yourself up that you're not at it.
Reference tracks also help you pick better source tones as well. Like, you might
Definitely.
have a guitar tone that sounds amazing, but like a guitar tone that sounds amazing on its own probably isn't going to sound good in a mix. It just usually doesn't
Yeah.
work that way.
Totally different world.
Yeah, completely different world. So
I feel that way about bass tones.
bass tones,
I'll
especially,
get like a cool bass
everything,
tone and then I put it in the mix. I'm like
everything.
disappointed with it.
If something sounds awesome and full and sick sounding, when you put it in a mix, it's going to just be too big. It's going to just crowd it. Um,
Totally.
so imposter syndrome, some ways around it are, just fucking ignore it and work. That's the biggest one, is just like acknowledge that you're having that feeling, and then just do the things that you need to get done.
Yep.
Listening back to things a couple months after, and really giving yourself, true objectivity, or as close as you can get without, taking like a psychedelic or something. Um,
Yeah.
that's actually a pretty good way to get perspective on your music,
It
if you're
is.
ever
I used to
engaging.
smoke a bowl after my mixes and then
Oh,
just check them
sure,
out that way.
sure, why not? Yeah, anything. I mean, whatever it is. Maybe you have a drink or something if you're a guy who likes alcohol. But um, I guess we've never shied away from being honest on this podcast. So why would we do that now? Personally, I didn't do this much, but I found that a really good way to get a solid perspective on how good you actually are is to listen to your stuff when you are tripping on a psychedelic, mushrooms or something.
It's so different.
You will be able to, anybody who's done that stuff, and I'm not saying you should do it, but anybody who's done that stuff will know that when you're in that state, you are able to see things for what they actually are. You're able to have true objectivity about things and separate your own
Yes.
thoughts from what something actually is. So if you're listening to a mix or listening to a song and you're in that state and you realize that song's really good, it's like, that's a good feeling. Like, that sticks with you.
It feels great.
It's self gratification, or whatever you want to say, self-actualization.
Yeah.
It's cool.
There we go.
But you also shouldn't rely on drugs to get through your mental struggles. You do need to figure out how to deal with sober everyday living, because that's the majority of your life.
Yes. And there are ways to handle things from a sober perspective too. There are
Meditation.
like the right ways to do something. And of course, if you're really doubting whatever scenario in life that is, that's when I would kind of treat myself to like a little bit of therapy, if you want to call it that.
Sure. Meditation, or going for a walk, or just taking a break and coming back to it later with fresh ears. All of those things are good practices and things that you should do, because perspective is so easy to lose. But and the imposter syndrome creeps in. You work on something for 2 hours and then all of a sudden it all sounds like shit. It just creeps in, and all of a sudden you think you're bad at it. And you're not.
Yep.
You're just tired. Your perspective.
There are very few projects that I've moved forward with that I'm actually like confident about all the way through. Sometimes my own, and so far this American metal project band, it's just it makes me feel like I'm actually good at it, because it's
you are.
I'm getting great reinforcement from people. I can actually feel like the mixes are sounding great, but that's so far and few between, because usually, like you said, with those problems that come up and like the loss of perspective, and like you said, self-actualization too is a good word for that. It's just so easy to get lost and discouraged.
I'm going to look that up. What is self-actualization? Am I using that word correctly? I think I am. The realization of fulfillment of one's talents and potentialities. Okay, yeah, there you go.
It's perfect.
That is the correct thing to say there. So,
it's
self-actualization. It sounds like
that sums it up real well.
It sounds like the song name for like a gent band that has like a groove with like ambient guitars in the background. That's what it sounds like. It's like sounds like an old North Lane song or something.
Oh man, North Lane is so cool. I would listen to him.
Cool.
Self-actualization.
Yeah. But okay, back, reeling it in. We're back. Imposter syndrome. So that's just something to be aware of. And I think it's also important to be aware of, whatever mental issues that you may have. Did I lose Andrew? I did lose Andrew. 1 second. Hey, welcome back.
Hi there. What happened?
I don't know. The call ended, but we're all good.
Cool.
That didn't cause too much of an issue.
Yeah, good thing it was real quick.
Yeah, so
that scared the shit out of me. Everything just turned off.
So anyway, what the fuck?
Weird.
I don't know what happened. But okay, imposter syndrome. Yeah. So understanding, your own mental health issues, because let's be honest, we're all doing music. We're all probably kind of fucked up in some way. I know I am. Understanding yourself and acknowledging feelings when they're happening, but also knowing when it's your brain kind of playing tricks on you is important. Like, throughout every single winter, I have no energy. I lack motivation. It's hard for me to write. I feel like I suck at everything. And then the spring comes around and I realize, oh, none of that's true. I've just been, dealing with seasonal depression for the last 5 months. And I just didn't realize it while it was happening. So it's even though in the moment you might not really acknowledge it, you have to at least just like keep it in your head. Like, for me with seasonal depression, it's like, okay, everything seems worse because of this. I'll get through this. In the spring, it'll all melt away and it'll be fine. And, here it is. I'm fine. Am I still, negative about a lot of things? Yeah, I'm a fucking negative person. That is my biggest character trait, is I am a sad, negative person quite often. But during warmer weather, I'm certainly a lot more motivated to get things done, and I think less harshly about myself, and I'm less quick to jump to those negative thoughts than I may be throughout the rest of the year.
I'm the exact same way.
Mm.
Winter is just awful. Of course, I kind of try and take advantage of it because we get a lot of snow days, or it's just blatantly too cold to go outside.
Yeah.
So I'll try and use that to my advantage to be in my music room writing or like being productive in some way. Because when I'm not productive is when those thoughts really set in. And
Mhm.
especially when I'm not productive on music, or, could be playing guitar, drums, or writing or recording and mixing, all of it. That's when I really start to kind of like lose sight of the value that I do have.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you get too lost in the sauce, lost in your own head.
yeah. It's definitely like a hibernation kind of thing in the
Yeah.
winter. I take it very easy.
My work slowed down for me this last winter a lot. I mean, there was like 2-3 months where I barely had anything happening other than, the consistent weekend gig that I have. So like that was tough too, because then you have it in your head, even though projects are coming later on, you kind of get it in your head that like, what if it stays slow? Like it's scary.
Scary.
It's fucking scary.
Very.
Yeah. It's terrifying.
Yeah, don't like that feeling.
Yeah. So I guess the moral is, do what you can to remove your personal feelings from a situation, acknowledge negative feelings when you have them, but then, get to work, try to look at things as objectively as you can, and use techniques like meditation, taking breaks, whatever it may be, whatever works for you. Use those techniques to get, fresh perspectives on your things, and just don't stop.
Yeah.
That's
Don't give up. Definitely no need to give up.
Yeah.
I'll tell myself that I'm just done for a little bit. I'll either be like frustrated or just really not feeling motivated to do it, but I always come back to it. There's always something like a conversation you and I have that's going to make me go dive into mixing, or like I'll hear something that inspires me, makes me want to play my guitar again. It's always going to be there. And sometimes those breaks are healthy. It could be a good thing.
Yeah, I was sick the whole last week. My ears were too fucked up to do any real audio work, but I wrote a lot of music during that time. I wrote like 4 or 5 songs in the last week.
Oh wow!
Just because
that's
like
dope.
I kept waking up at like 6 a.m. because I was on virus schedule where I would sleep any time and then wake up at weird hours. And for me, 6 a.m. is a weird time to wake up. I generally don't wake up till closer to noon. So, because I'm a musician, why would I? And anyway, so I've been waking up in the morning all week, right? And it was just strange waking up at that time, and I had nothing else to do, and playing like a video game, even though I was sick, playing a video game in the day it makes me feel disgusting at this point. I'm like, you lazy piece of shit.
Oh,
so I would just sit at
my
my computer and play guitar a bunch, and I learned a couple of songs, and I wrote some songs, and it's cool. It's kind of one of those little eye-openers where it's like, well, maybe I should just try to wake up a little earlier, because it worked.
Yeah.
It worked in getting me to do more. No.
I love mornings.
Yeah.
I've definitely slipped out of it, but I'm so productive in the morning.
Have you ever noticed how like waking up is usually the worst part of the day when you're waking up at like a later time? Like it just sucks and it feels wrong. And then
100%.
But then when you're waking up in the morning, even though the mornings kind of suck, it's like it feels proper. Like you wake up and you're like, okay, and you're awake. Let's wake up. Let's go get food, like, or whatever. Let's make some food. It feels nice.
Yep.
So it's something that I'd like to
really
keep
does.
going, but I know myself, man. I'm all over the place. Eventually I'm going to stay up because of insomnia. I'll stay up until fucking 7 a.m. one day, and then it's like, all right, sleep schedule's destroyed. So,
yeah, done for.
Yeah, but it's something to keep in mind that it is sort of useful.
Yeah, it does feel better.
Yeah.
I one time I heard about like intervals of sleep, and like every 2 hours you hit a new cycle of sleep, and that 6 hours of sleep, if you just wake up after that, like it's before some other cycle. And I didn't necessarily do that, but I would sleep for like 6 hours when I'd wake up in the morning, go to bed at like 10 o'clock, wake up at 4. And I felt good. And then when I sleep a bunch, 8, 9, 10 hours, sometimes if I'm like exhausted, I wake up feeling like shit. Like it's a whole
8 is proper
other
for me.
ball game.
Some people can get away with less sleep, but 8 hours for me is ideal. That's
8.
That's when I feel
8
rested.
Is sweet.
I naturally I sleep for more than that. So I have to set alarms, because if I don't get myself up, I will feel like shit because oversleeping is really bad for you. Like it makes you feel
Dude,
really
it's
tired.
awful.
But
Yeah.
8 hours, if I get 8 hours consistently for a couple nights in a row, my body just gets into a good rhythm. And then funny enough, I don't even actually need to set alarms at that point. Like I'll just start waking up, 7.5, 8 hours into sleeping on my own.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, internal clock is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels good. But yeah, you're right in that if you're sleeping, you should always try to sleep in 2-hour intervals. That way you don't, because if you wake up in the middle of a REM cycle, you are fucked up feeling. You are just
Yep.
tired and gross and groggy, and it's going to stick with you all day. So it's actually
Totally.
better to sleep for 2 hours than for 3 hours, which is weird, but it's true. You should
It
just stick to those 2-hour intervals because they feel a lot nicer.
Definitely.
Yeah, there's a life hack.
Yeah. I didn't really believe it. And I don't know if maybe it was coincidence that I found, well, it probably was coincidence that I found out, but I just started noticing over like the 4 years of paying attention to how I'm sleeping. It helped, especially when I'd be super busy working like my day job, then coming home and
Mhm.
working on music.
Yeah,
At
it's a
first, I was
grind.
kind of like, man, I'm only getting like 6 hours of sleep. Like, that probably can't be great. But I noticed every morning I'd wake up great. And then on weekends, when I'd sleep in till 8 or 9, I felt just fucked up.
Yeah.
Just tired.
I mean,
So I
I
just
don't know
kept
the
that
science
schedule the
behind it,
same.
but I would imagine there is some variance in how much human beings need. Let's look it up. Let's find out.
There has to be something. And like you said, it's probably different per person too, like the ample amount of rest.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Like, doctors recommend most adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Well,
That's strange.
yeah. I think people are probably all a bit different though. Like if it works for you, it works for you. Because your body
Totally.
knows best. If you feel
Yep.
tired and fucked up when you wake up, then you know for sure you didn't get enough rest. For me,
Yeah.
8 hours is ideal. Like 7.5 to 8
I-
hours.
That sounds perfect, man. As long as it works. I know people who would get like 4 hours of sleep a night, and they were just like the most energized, proactive people I think I've ever met in my life.
It's caffeine.
Yeah, that's true.
I used to do that.
Lots of
where I would
monsters.
stay up super late working on music, and then I would only give myself, 4 hours to sleep before work. And I was miserable every day. It would take me hours to wake up to the point where I wasn't just groggy. It was horrible for me.
Hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the time you're awake, it's like time for bed.
Mm-hmm.
It's messed up.
Yeah. And you have to take so much caffeine during the day, and it just makes you all jittery and shit. Like, not healthy.
Yeah.
Not healthy.
No.
Anyway, I guess we talked about sleep today. Interesting.
It's important.
Yeah. It is
Find
important.
what works for you.
Taking care of
Helps
yourself.
your mental,
Yeah.
helps your body.
I guess today's more about like mental health, right? And managing. If we're really thinking about like the real topic of today, with all the things that we've talked about, it's ways to do this and live healthily while you're doing it.
Yeah.
We've talked about
It can get
imposter syndrome
overwhelming.
and comparing yourself to others. It's really, yeah, it's really about good practices to make sure that you keep your mental health healthy, for lack of a better
Yep.
word. Because when your
Totally.
mental health goes down, your productivity goes down, and also your creativity suffers. I know everybody thinks that struggling artists make the best art, and maybe to some extent that can be true. That people who've gone through hardship put out really meaningful art. But I can tell you, in a career where you're supposed to be consistently creative, consistency is impossible when you're miserable. It really is.
It is.
You have to take pretty good care of yourself so day in and day out you can make good creative decisions.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are times where I would be like down in the dirt, and I think really what kept me making music and enjoying what I was doing was just like the sheer passion that I had and still kind of do have for it. Because that was like my getaway from work and like life and stress and like all this crap, that everyone just faces in life.
Yeah.
That was like the ultimate outlet. And I wouldn't necessarily say I channeled all my stress into my music. I just
Yeah.
made cool music that I thought I wanted to hear because it was fucking cool.
Yeah.
So unless you have that like under there, or when things really are difficult, it's not easy to continue doing those things, especially when those things might take up a lot of time.
Yeah, and your outlook on music changes when it becomes a job. Like the way
Yes,
you think about music will
drastically.
inevitably change, like because it stops being your escape and it starts being work.
Yep.
So I find myself mixing. I generally, I don't mix off the clock anymore. Like I don't just mix for myself very much, if at all, anymore, just because I feel like I'm working then. So
Totally.
it's radically changed how I feel about um, this aspect of music. At least I write a ton of music still all the time because I still love doing that. That's never going to go away. I don't think that's the passion, is the creative, just getting an idea out. But yeah,
It feels good.
yeah, yeah. Um,
I noticed the change, dude, and it
mm.
wasn't necessarily when I went full time, but
It
like
creeps in after a
when I,
while.
yeah, just constantly doing music for myself, and like I've always been like kind of money oriented, and I've fantasized the freelance lifestyle.
Hmm.
Um, so like even before I got to where I could, freelance, I was just getting tired of it. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just work, and I wasn't really seeing any sort of return that I wanted. Granted, I was very naive, I guess, so I didn't really know what to do to get to that point at the time.
Hmm.
I just don't know what I expected, but I didn't get what I thought I was gonna get, so it kind of just bummed me out.
Yeah. Well, I'm proud of the progress you've made. It's cool.
Yeah, same to you, dude.
Thank you.
We've definitely grown a lot in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. I'll tell a little story that I told you before we get going, and I'll keep it pretty vague. But a production company, like a live production company, live music, that I interviewed with maybe 3 years ago, like pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, called me back, and they're finally like they're super busy all of a sudden. Like concerts have been really happening again, and
Awesome.
they called me back because I was just on their contact list. And when I interviewed with them, it was to get a position where I'd be making $16, $17 an hour, working 18-hour days, setting up a stage, and being a stagehand, and then breaking down and
Brutal.
coming home. Yeah, and just awful, right? Just super
Yeah.
brutal, backbreaking work. And now when they called me, this is the first time the guy's talked to me since. It was like he was asking me if I could work during this weekend. I was like, I'm booked out a month and a half in advance. Like I can't.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm like, I've been working full time in the studio and doing live sound stuff every weekend. And um, he asked me what positions I'd be interested in, and I was just honest, like just live mixing. That's the only thing I'd really like to do. And he asked me if I'd be comfortable, mixing for larger touring bands. And I said, yeah, I've never done it, but I've worked. I do a live mix every single weekend on a good system with a lot of gear. Like it's a complex system that I need to know, right? So it's the same
Absolutely.
thing you get at a lot of venues. Um, so yeah, it was just really funny to me. And you asked, rates, and maybe I lowballed myself. I don't actually know what live sound guys charge, but I said, I'm whatever job I do, I try to make at least 60 an hour. Um,
That's pretty good.
yeah, I mean, I
I think
factored
that's
in.
not bad.
Right now, I'm making 50 an hour doing studio, and I factored in 60. Okay, because I'm gonna have to travel and stuff like that. It's fair to ask for more, I think. Um,
Absolutely.
and it was just the conversation just struck me as funny. It gave me some of that objectivity as we're talking about, in that it's easy to feel like I've made no progress. But then when a call like that happens, and I think about where I was back then, you know, studio I worked at shut down. I'm living at my parents' house after college. I have no direction. I'm desperately applying to every single
Yeah.
studio and live production company that I can, and nobody's fucking hiring me. And my portfolio is fine, but like, I had some clients, I didn't even have a place to record them at that point, right? Like,
Oh man. Yeah.
and I think back to then versus now, and it's like, it just kind of made me chuckle. Like, oh shit, a lot has changed. I've become,
A lot of growth.
yeah, I've become a lot more of a professional. So that story is not really me bragging. It's just more like, huh, that gave me it let me peer behind the curtain of like what's actually going on with my life, aside from just my
Yeah.
own fucked up mental health and imposter syndrome and anxiety. And it let me just see like, oh shit. When he asked if I could do that thing, mixing for a larger touring band, and I said yes, it wasn't arrogance. It wasn't bullshit. It was like, yeah, I do live mixes all the time. I'd totally be able to do.
Yeah.
Like
You're like confident there.
I know how to do that. You know,
Sometimes it takes that kind of call. I feel like they'll like actually like wake you up kind of.
that's kind of
Or
yeah,
like someone reaching out or like a certain compliment somewhere to like actually know
yeah,
and like snap you back.
yeah. Well, when people who are like good give you compliments, it's like, oh shit, that feels
That's
good.
cool.
Yeah,
Yo, yeah.
that's always a really good feeling when a musician you liked, or even if a band that you're working with, when they're extremely excited about something. Like that's a little peer into
Yes.
that perspective as well. Of like, oh, okay, I'm doing something good.
I'm doing something, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. I love that.
yeah. I think we've
I don't know why sometimes imposter syndrome really hits when it does, because like, and also not really bragging, but more often than not, the bands do compliment on how good the production is in comparison to what they've had or like what they could have done.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but it's still those same projects sometimes where I'm like, God damn, dude, like who am I? And why am I? Why? I don't know. I don't know.
yeah.
You just encompassing imposter syndrome, it hits weird even when I feel like it shouldn't.
Well, there's this weird idea in the music industry that you need to get famous at 18 and make millions of dollars, or you're nobody. And it's
Yeah.
just kind of like
Yeah. That toxic.
it's not really true. It was more
No.
true for performers, but like even nowadays, I feel like I've noticed a trend where performers are getting older and older, and maybe it's always been like that. Maybe it's just as a kid everybody looks super young, but the reality is all the band dudes who are finally making it are like 27. So
Yeah. Some even older.
yeah, I mean, I used to my view on what a 21-year-old looked like when I was a kid was all fucked up too, right? Because everybody looks so old. But no, the reality
Totally.
is that like 21-year-olds are kids. They're very much kids.
Yep.
They're super super young.
Young people still.
Yeah, and they don't have their shit together. And I don't even think I was making near my best music at 21. Um, there's a anybody who watches anime who watches this will get this. So the creator of the anime Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is like widely regarded as one of the best ever, just a hugely prolific series that huge cult following. It's one
I don't
of
think
the
I've ever
most
watched it.
it's one of the most emotional stories that I think's been told, or at least emotionally resonating stories that's been told in the medium of anime.
Totally.
It deals with things like depression and loneliness and abandonment issues and things like that. And the creator of that had it in his head that people make their masterpiece at 35 years old. That's like the culmination of like, all the years of hard work getting good at something. At 35 is when the masterpiece comes out. And some of that is just arbitrary, right?
Interesting.
Like he was just extremely motivated at that time, and that's probably why he made that anime and it did really well, is because he was just on his shit, working,
Yeah.
really putting in effort. But it's a cool perspective, I think, because it is the antithesis of the you have to be famous at 18, because what do you fucking know at 18?
Dude,
I didn't know
yeah.
shit. What could I write about real world experiences at 18 versus now? Like I feel like the music I'm making now is much more mature, just because like I've dealt with real adult hardship and sadness, right?
Absolutely. You
So
have real life experience.
yeah, and I
I feel like at 18, those famous 18-year-olds, I don't know how I feel about the term industry plant, but like I feel like they come
it's
from money or they're put into a scenario where they
oftentimes
have
they
these
do have
resources.
a parent that is somewhat connected. Although I'm
Yes.
not using that to belittle them, because generally you have to be pretty fucking talented to make it at that level.
Oh
So
yeah.
you
It
look at
still
like
takes work and it
it takes
takes
a
a skill.
ton of work, and they're still highly skilled. So it's not talking shit on it, but there is the trend
No,
of like, okay, actors, musicians, they tend to come from lines of actors and musicians, right? Like there's a
totally.
trend there that you can notice. It's you know, it just is what it is. That's Hollywood.
Yeah. It's
Um,
like people being born into money. People who have millions of dollars are more than likely born into something that
mhm.
kickstarted them.
They definitely have more opportunities. I don't think it's just jealousy to say that. A kid who is
No,
really rich, who has parents that are really talented, is also has the look, of Hollywood, where they have like the certain look that everybody likes for their stars and their
totally.
celebrities. If you have all of those things, you have definitely a lot more opportunities to make it. It doesn't mean you're going to. There's plenty of rich kids who have gone. Look at Chet Hanks. Tom Hanks' son. Fucking Chet Hanks. He's gone nowhere, right?
Is he?
He's a meme.
Who's that? I didn't even know he
Yeah,
existed.
he started he was the guy where he started saying "White Boy Summer," and that became like a huge
Oh
meme.
boy, him.
Yeah, like, and he made just a really shitty rap song, like, um, like that is an example of like, okay, being good looking and rich isn't always going to get you everywhere. Sure, his career is like somewhere, but like, is it really his career or is it just like family money that's keeping him afloat?
Totally.
You know?
Totally.
So when you do look at people like Billie Eilish or, you know, the joke about indie musicians is like, when you look up an indie musician, their parents' name is always blue on Wikipedia. Like it's always like a link.
Yep.
Their parents
Every
always
time.
have. So that's a joke. But those people are genuinely talented as well. Almost always.
Yes. Yes. They have a good team of people who are all very skilled around them.
And they're very skilled.
And as a group,
yeah.
yes.
They just have.
Yes.
They
like,
just because their parents are already in the industry, they inherited the looks and they inherited a network and financial
and
support
that's okay.
to a certain extent, and that is life.
A lot of that music I still enjoy too.
Yeah, no, I love
people
a lot
who
of
are
that
like
music.
8 years younger than me. I still think it's dope music. Billie
It's
Eilish.
amazing.
I was gonna say eyelash. Billie Eilish does make good music.
She does. I mean, it's not for me, but it's very good. I mean, clearly it's good.
Yes.
I think her brother is extremely talented. Honestly, as a musician, he
Absolutely.
knows his shit. Like
Yes.
Billie, to me, she can sing. Obviously, good singer, very good singer, and she is charismatic. She has the looks. She's the face of that brand. But when you listen to any of the master classes that Phineas has put on, like that man is a legit musician. He really
He's very smart.
he is very studied in this art form, and you can tell. And so when I look at the two of them, I definitely identify more with Phineas, right? Like he's the one that I'm like, okay, you know, this feels wrong to say it, and maybe I'm wrong, but it does feel like Phineas is the brains behind the project for the most part.
I would feel the same way.
Yeah, maybe
I
that's
would make
wrong.
the same assumption.
It just seems that way, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
They're a team. He might be the brains, but he definitely needs, you know, his sister. She is an important part of that too.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And her weird.
It's like being an instrumentalist, making
Yeah.
what would I do, like deathcore instrumentals? Well, I need a vocalist. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm the brain behind it. That feels kind of conceited, but I did write the instrumental. I do have an idea where I want the lyrical patterns to land on and stuff.
Well, and
I know it's gonna be
Billie's sensibilities have also been important for them. Like she's been good at keeping herself.
Yeah.
She's been good at making people, like keeping herself in the news. She's good at that. She has been good at with her weird sense of fashion that people enjoy. Like she's done a really good job. I don't know if she has a team making those decisions. Who really knows? But whatever it is, somebody's doing a good job. I'd like to credit that to her, hopefully.
I admire that, dude.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
What an interesting like occupation I feel like that would be at that level. Like your worries and like motives and stuff. How different.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess maybe not like vastly different, just on a larger scale, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, either way, I think it's incredibly admirable because I don't know how I would be feeling through all that.
I imagine it's got to be hard just to get back into the mindset of just writing music at that point because you're dealing with just so many. You're interviewing always, and you're a celebrity. You can't go outside without people saying hi to you. Like, how do you just get back to the stage where you're like sitting down and you're doing what we do in your room writing music? You know, when you walk outside and the world is just bending its knee to you, it's got to be hard to humble yourself to the point where you're like, oh, I have to make sure this is really good. You know, but. That's something.
Crazy.
That's something we might not ever know, and that's okay. That is life.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I used to be jealous, and now I'm older, and it's fine. Everything's fine.
I might have a little bit of envy, but
who doesn't?
To some degree, exactly.
They're living the dream.
On
who doesn't
any level?
have it? Yeah, but
yep.
But it's not going to stop me from doing my thing. It's not going to discourage me because I'm older than she was when she got famous. You know?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Everybody's on a different path. Oliver Tree's like 29.
Yeah. Well, another cool thing I found out recently, I really love this band Dive. Like they're an amazing like shoegazy post-punk band. Like whatever they are, they're really fucking cool. Very catchy, really interesting melodies. And the singer didn't even start playing in bands until he was 27, and he's 37 now. So like,
oh wow,
he looks like he's in his 20s. Like he looks super young, but like that is a good like perspective thing. Like, oh, I'm 27 now. He didn't even start playing until 27. in bands. Like, okay, you know, this is fine. And maybe that's why his music speaks to me so much, is because it doesn't sound like the music a 20-year-old makes. It sounds really
Yes.
mature, you know? It
Yep.
sounds like somebody who's been listening and playing music for a lot longer. And
Absolutely. I
yeah,
love music like that. That just feels matured.
there is a study that showed that people tend to listen to music that was written by people within 7 to 8 years of their age, whatever way,
Huh.
younger or older. So,
Interesting.
and I don't know why that is. I'd like to think I will keep up with younger music as it comes out. And I think I've done a pretty good job right now. I like newer music a lot. Um,
Yeah.
but,
Same. Same.
maybe there will come a point where it's just hard to relate to those emotions because they're just not thinking the same way that I am. And artists my
Yeah.
age are, like I was saying with that Zachary Cole guy, he's actually 10 years older than me, which is crazy. But um, he's just writing music that I feel like I connect with more. There's real adult suffering behind that music that you can't really capture as a 16-year-old or 17-year-old when you're depressed. And depression you're feeling is very real at that age, right? But
Yeah.
when you look back on it, it's like I was worried about nothing. Life got way more difficult.
Yeah.
So
It happened fast.
yeah, just interesting. All
I
right.
do feel the same way though. 100%.
Yeah.
Like it's just so much more relatable. They might even put something in like through an analogy that just hits so hard to think like, man, I would never thought that I'd feel that way when I was like a 16, even 18-year-old.
Yeah.
Just so much of a experience. You can relate back to so much more, and there's so many significant growths and changes that happen from like 18 to 25 and probably 25 to
25,
35.
25. Yeah. 25 to me was like between 23 and 25 was insane. Just the changes I went through as a
Wicked
person.
crazy.
Yeah. And even now, like
Yeah,
25 to 27, certainly I've gone through more, but that was a period where it was like around 25 was a huge period of growth where I truly became an adult. I feel like I became an independent person. Before then, I
totally.
was just always relying on my parents. And it feels bad because our parents' generations, they were out of the house at 18 or 20 and they're getting married at 20 and having kids. And you look at statistically, like, that's just not really happening anymore. Like, as society's progressed, the age of when a person becomes truly independent gets pushed back further and further. And 50% of
Yeah.
the adult population from 18 to 30 is still living with their parents, or 50%.
Dude, things are becoming increasingly difficult, so much more difficult as time goes on.
Difficult
Uh,
financially, certainly. And I think that's also stunting our generation's growth in terms of
yeah,
becoming independent. I'm almost 30 now.
totally.
I'm 27. I am closer to 30 than I am to 20 by far. And I feel like only within the last year have I truly become independent, like started my
Yes.
independence. Meanwhile, my parents were independent at age 20 or 18,
Yeah,
right? So,
mine too. Very
um,
young.
and I
They had
imagine,
kids at like 22. They bought a house at 23.
and I imagine their income back then was probably comparable to what I'm making now. Um, it took me 10 more years to get there than it did for them. And it's
Wild.
not like I didn't work. I worked really hard. So
You did.
it's really interesting. Um, the generational, how much has changed. And maybe that's because humans live longer now. Maybe it's because of how bad the economy is at the moment. There's a lot of things, but
Yeah, there's a lot of variables. That all breaks down into mental wellness too.
yeah.
Just makes things, that reflection of like thinking, well, my parents did this. I feel way behind. I feel like that's a heavy weight to wear on your
Mhm.
chest. It can be if those are things that you like admire.
It does
That
it
like
does feel like we're all really behind, but if our entire generation is dealing with what we're dealing with, and for the most part they are, there are people
yes,
who are super successful at young ages still, but for the most part it seems like everybody's on in the same boat where our growth has either been stunted or maybe this is just the new norm, right? Um,
yep,
then you shouldn't really feel bad about it. Maybe 30 is actually the new 20. As weird as that
it
sounds
could
to
be.
say, maybe 30 really is when people will around when they'll become financially independent again. Um,
I feel like that would be accurate,
yeah.
judging based on where I'm at. 30, I feel like 30, you're actually a grown up. There
Hmm.
isn't any bar that you just like wake up over as an adult, but I feel like 30 in my shoes is enough time and experience to be probably more developed and mature
hmm
in a lot of ways that I would be able to be independent like that,
Yeah.
probably more comfortably and confidently.
I was reading about why our generation looks younger than our parents' generation at the same age. Because if you look at people 1 or 2 generations ago, at 20 years old, they looked way older than we look now, right?
Yeah, it's kind
Um,
of weird, isn't it?
and what they found is that people who look young at older ages are actually aging slower. Like it's not just like, oh, you look young. It's like your body is not deteriorating as fast. And I wonder if that's
Hmm.
because, maybe we had less stress growing up. Life is certainly more stressful now,
Yeah.
right?
Oh
With
yeah.
the way the economy is. But growing up, I would say maybe we had a more comfortable childhood than from generations past because of things like technology and things like modern medicine and just anything, and maybe our childhood was just a bit better because of that,
It's
and
very
and maybe
interesting.
that's why we're aging at a slower rate. That could also maybe theoretically contribute to why mentally it feels like we're not where our parents were at our age. Or the
Yeah.
flip side is maybe they were as immature as we were at 21. And that's fucking crazy to think that my parents had kids at that age when they were as immature as I was.
Oh my
That's
God, yeah.
that is crazy to me. But maybe that was also true. Um, but
There are things like
uh,
conditioning, the people who raised them were brought up in a very, I feel like, strict,
yes,
very ownership and gratification driven society.
they were
So I
raised by
feel like
baby
that,
boomers. They were raised by
yes,
post World War II. Super
very firm
patriotic,
individuals.
patriotic, super independent people. People,
Very.
people that were like, I go here, I work 40 hours a week. I've worked at this company for 25 years. And maybe that's not exactly what you think of as independent, but independent in the sense that it's like they instilled that work ethic into their kids.
Yeah,
Where
totally.
with our generation, I mean, my parents tried to instill that work ethic into me, but I just saw through the cracks. I was like, that doesn't
Yep.
seem to be working for people anymore. You know, that kind of
No.
like you find a good company and you stay there. It doesn't really work like that anymore.
Mm-mm.
Nowadays, it's more about
There are
being
a lot of things
independent.
that help. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that nowadays it seems like even if you're working for companies and you're not freelancing, like it seems like the right thing to do now is you're constantly every few years finding a new job that is a pay raise and you're just working your way up
Yeah.
by bouncing around jobs rather than sticking with the company, which is cool. Like
Yep.
I think, whatever you got to do. But the
No, I,
norm,
I think that just works too. I mean, you're just getting nothing but experience as you move up. And I feel like on a broad scale, I guess like an example would be Belcampo, where I worked before.
mhm.
People would do that all the time. They would come in and get some training from the company and they would use it and get the experience and then move on to some government program. And then they would move up their ranks in that government program following that system. And like a couple of years later, they're like, whatever you want to call success, but financially successful or well off
Mhm.
in a good position with a company that's going to keep them and treat them right.
I think that's smart because if we're going to get into, you know, something like this, I think companies don't actually give a shit about you. Like it's clear that they
Not
don't.
even a little
Maybe
bit.
maybe back 2 generations ago they did and they took care of their employees more. But now that they've cut things like pensions and like a lot of companies don't even offer health care, like they don't care about you and they'll
There's
overwork you.
zero care.
Like you're just a cog in the machine. So why should you care about taking advantage of the system for your favor, where you get training from a company for free and you get paid to do it, and then you go do something else? I see no issue with that. You're just playing the game at that point.
No. Yep.
That's the hand we've been dealt. You might as well
Yeah.
use the system in a way that benefits you.
Of
Um,
course. It's like that in a lot of ways.
yeah.
In so many ways of life, just it's there and other people are going to take advantage of it. So why don't you give it a shot?
hmm
Otherwise, you will be stuck in the same spot for ages and ages. And like, I don't remember what the thing was, but it was every year you lose X% of your overall value as an employee to that company. So
Yeah.
people moving like that and constantly moving up. I mean,
That
one, you're
plus
gonna move
inflation,
faster than
right?
inflation.
Yeah. That plus
What's that?
inflation. That plus inflation. If your
Oh yeah,
company isn't giving you a raise to keep up with inflation, like you're taking a pay cut, right? So
yeah. Most places do a very low percentile while inflation raises, say, 7, 10, 11%. They
hmm
give you 5%,
yeah,
3% even, 25 cents a year.
yeah. It's just not worth it. So
No.
yeah, it's something to think about. I think the worst thing you can do for mental health is stay at a job that's not treating you well. I think
Yeah.
that'll fuck you up. I think if you were at a job you hate,
Oh yeah.
you should just change that as soon as you can, because I've had situations where I stayed somewhere and my mental health deteriorated to the point where it was just like mental break, points of bad. So
Totally.
I think it's just smart to recognize this job isn't working and move on and find something that will placate you, and then work on getting your career, what you actually want going.
Yes.
A company might call that a side hustle, but like whatever it is, like get that to the point where you can eventually have that stepping off point and just do that. Like
Yep.
I
Or just keep changing those day jobs
yeah,
too if you really need the refreshment.
yeah. I know we haven't talked
Keep
about
finding something new.
I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast, but like I've been dealing with horrible medical issues throughout the last year. Just like the worst shit I've ever dealt with. It's debilitating. It sucks. It's depressing. It's hard. I don't even know if I'm ever going to be able to go to be a normal person again, right? Like it impacts my life
Super
that
fucked
much, and it might not be able to be treated. But um, somehow, just because I'm working a job that I enjoy more, life is bearable. And I would say my mental health is actually probably better than it was when I was working jobs that I hated. Even though
Totally.
everything in my life medically, even though medically it's way worse than it's ever been. Just having a job that I enjoy has made life that much better, to where it, it outweighs how bad my actual life is right now.
That's got
So
to be nice. That has to feel good for you.
I that, I guess it's just a wake up. I hope it's a wake up call to anybody working a shitty job that's negatively impacting you. Like that job, since you're doing that more than anything, like that's the most important thing to make sure that you enjoy, or at least that you don't hate it.
Yes.
Like that will trickle down and affect everything about your mental state. So take care of that sooner rather than later. Um,
Absolutely. It can fuck you up.
yeah, we're a little bit over time, and my voice is also starting to go because I'm still sick. It's starting to feel really rough on
Totally.
my voice. So I think we're going to call it, but this has been a pretty cool episode. I mean, I thought we were going to just talk about specific things like comparing yourself to others and imposter syndrome, but it kind of blossomed into just overall
Yeah.
mental health, which I think is a subject that is pretty relevant to anybody doing music.
Yes. Mental
Anyway,
health is so important.
before I start coughing from how much it's hurting to talk, we're just going to call it here. Thank you guys for joining. We're going to try to be more
Yes.
consistent about this again. Maybe Wednesdays or Thursdays. I'm not sure when the actual day will be, but we'll figure it out. We'll try to get some guests on soon. I'm going to try to not be sick next week. Thank you guys
Good
for
luck.
joining.
Good luck. We're all counting on you.
Yeah. Wish a homie luck. But thank you guys. Appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you very much.
And we won't skip 2 weeks again. So see you guys. Thank you.
See you next time.